Okay, great. All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're having a lunch and learn on working with male survivors of intimate partner violence. And we have two presenters today. It's going to be Dominic Agonoi, who is the Safe, Strong, Sober program manager, and Jordan Addison, who is the TAP 808 manager from DVAC. So take it away, gentlemen.
Good morning, everybody. I did some training a couple weeks ago with PIC, so I'm really excited to be back. But if Ella doesn't stop going on vacation so that I have to do these instead of her, I'm going to be super upset. Um, she keeps assigning us them. Oh, I have to go on vacation. And we're like, can we take a vacation? But we love Ella. We're really glad for this partnership ongoing. And today, we're going to talk about male survivors, which is unfortunately an area where there isn't near as much research as there are for survivors of IPV who identify as women. Dominic, I think this one's you.
Oh yeah. So just a little icebreaker. On a Kirby scale, how's everyone feeling today? I'm a 3. I'm perpetually tired. A
I feel
4.
like I'm a 6. I'm in a pretty good mood today.
And then a
It's my
3.
dog's birthday, so it's any excuse at all to buy baked goods.
I love whoever said a 5. I love being ready to fight.
Oh, sorry. Wherever you are on the Kirby scale today, hopefully our presentation, which is about a serious topic, but Dominic and I are both pretty serious goofballs. So hopefully we'll bring a little education to your lunch today, and also a little humor and some happiness if you're feeling like a 2 maybe. So I'm Jordan. I am the TAP 808 program manager. So if you haven't been in a DVAC presentation before where we talk about services, TAP 808 is a program for teens, and we define teens as 12 to 21. And we provide prevention and education and outreach services like trainings, workshops, etc. And also direct service advocacy for survivors of intimate partner violence who are in those age ranges. I've been with DVAC since 2023. In my previous career, I was a high school teacher, and I also used to work at a domestic violence organization in Chicago, where I used to live. But I missed the teens when I moved back to Hawaii. So I am super excited to be in this role now where we get to work with teens all across the state. We're a statewide program, and everything with TAP is free and confidential.
Hi, I'm Dominic. I am the program manager for the Safe, Strong, and Sober program. We primarily assist clients who've had that intersection of intimate partner violence and substance use. We also provide education to providers across the state. So we're one of the other statewide programs at DVAC. A little bit about me. I previously was actually the trainer for the program under Jordan, and then he did the little switch to TAP 808, and I became the program manager. I used to work at Waikiki Health, where I was the HIV and STI tester there. During that time, I came across many people who were experiencing substance use, IPV, and in that private room that I had with them, I was sharing them with resources. I was being kind of like a short-term support system for them for any questions that they had or any resources or to help them find any resources that they were looking for. Um, I am a survivor myself, so I'm really glad that I'm able to do this presentation today.
Awesome. So some definitions and context that we want to define before we get into this. First is intimate partner violence, the definition of that. Domestic violence, domestic abuse, they're pretty interchangeable, especially here in Hawaii, because the definitions that all of the big organizations have come up with are reflected pretty correctly in our state language for our laws. But intimate partner violence is this pattern of abusive behaviors in a relationship where one person is attempting to gain or maintain power and control over another. So there could be a really toxic relationship where people are yelling at each other all the time and they're always breaking up and getting back together. But if there is no pattern of those abusive behaviors by one person to gain and maintain that power and control over another, that would not be considered intimate partner violence, which this just gets really in the weeds. And we're not going to go into all of it today. But when we're looking at male survivors, those patterns and those tactics that are being used to try to have power and control are going to look a little different in some ways than what we might see with teens or with women, female survivors. We're going to, of course, be talking about gender today. So we are operating on this definition that gender is a social construct that continually shifts over time in relation to social and historical context. So this just means, we're going to be talking pretty heavily about what it means to be a man, what is male. And when we're talking about this term male or being masculine, it's reflecting this nature and variation in how this gender is constructed and expressed right now in society today, here in the United States and in Hawaii. So it's not the same thing as sex, which we'll talk about later down in some slides. But when we're talking about gender, we're just talking about what it means to be female, what it means to be male to broader society. And of course, we want to acknowledge that all across the world, women are disproportionately affected by violence that is perpetrated by men. That is a fact. We acknowledge that, but we also are trying to provide support for all those who are affected by domestic abuse, regardless of their gender or their sex or culture, anything like that. We want to help all survivors of this type of violence. Okay, so this is the man box. So I'm going to ask you to type some things into the chat if you're comfortable. If it's not something that you want to participate in, just keep this in your head, because we're going to use this to talk about what it is to be a man. So we have the man box. Inside of this box, I want you to think about all of the characteristics of a stereotypical male or something that is stereotypically masculine. It's not necessarily what you think a man should be, it's what are the stereotypes. So the first one I want you to think about and participate in the chat if you feel comfortable is, what does a stereotypical masculine man look like? Take a second to think about what kind of clothes they might wear, how do they decorate their body, kind of facial expressions. I have no idea how to get the chat, so I'm going to rely on Dominic to read some out. I want you to think too about, what does a stereotypically masculine man talk like?
Ooh, so we already have someone said stoic, another one said strong. I'm neither one of those.
Okay. Think about attitudes. What do they act like? Oh, go ahead.
Someone said speak with confidence and authority, tall, athletic, stern, unaffectionate, aggressive.
Unaffectionate. I like that one. Okay. What do they do for fun? What does a stereotypical masculine man do for fun?
The sports ball.
Yeah. About for work?
Building things.
Yeah. What kind of car do they drive? Tacoma. What are they like in a relationship? What kind of feelings is a real man supposed to have? And how does a real man express those feelings?
No feelings. No feelings. Yeah, a lot of no feelings. To lead,
Yeah.
need to lead.
Yeah. And think about what you see portrayed in the media or on social media about men. What is it to be a man? What do men watch? What do they look like? And that's not something you have to put in the chat, but I just want you to keep that in your mind because this is what we're all being kind of socialized to see. Now, the other part of this is to think about that big area outside of the box. And I'm not going to ask you to put this stuff in the chat since we're all at work today. But I want you to think about what somebody might be called by other people if they do not fit inside the box. Think about what kind of words you might hear people use to describe someone who is not masculine. Usually, it's something derogatory about possibly being gay or being too effeminate, not being a man. And what kind of things happen to people who are not inside that box physically? There is a real innate danger in our society to not fit inside of this box as a man. And that's going to be really important when we start talking about the barriers later on for seeking services. Our Western society has been really shaped by this patriarchal belief system where men are economically, socially, and politically dominant. They're the people in charge. Their jobs are, CEO, pro athlete, construction. But because of that, not fitting in with those ideals it comes with some negative and harmful implications. Deviating from these things that are in the box is itself a risk for violence, which is going to become a barrier. So just kind of keep this in mind as we go through this presentation, that there are some pretty strict roles about what it means to be a man. And of course, this is all culturally relevant. And as, a white person who is not local to Hawaii, I'm not going to lecture you about that or touch on that too much. But just think within your own cultures, what does it mean to be a man? What are men in your cultures like? What are men in the cultures around you like? And the reason this is really important is because there's this big stereotype and misconception that domestic abuse, domestic violence, intimate partner violence only affects women. And that is not the case. When we look worldwide, 1 in 4 men are affected by intimate partner violence. That number has significantly increased in the last 20 years. And when we look locally, these are the statistics from 2024. 1/3 of all of the people who were surveyed across the state that are survivors are male. They identify as male. So that's a pretty big portion of our population here. Is this one you, Dominic, or me? I can't remember.
I think this one was you.
Okay. So there are some tactics and patterns. We're going to talk about those. You've probably seen in presentations with Ella, she uses the power and control wheel, which looks something like this. When we're talking about male survivors of intimate partner violence, you're going to see the same tactics of abuse, the same parts of coercive control, but there are some really distinct characteristics that males are going to face. So when we think about this threats and psychological abuse, very similar. Economic abuse, very similar. Substance use coercion, very similar. It's all similar, but these distinct differences are what we want to focus on when we're working with male survivors. One of the first things that we want to acknowledge is that men define violence differently than women do, just societally. And this is beginning to change, especially with the youth that we work with here at TAP. But just overall, throughout all the research that's been done, the very little bit of research that's been done, men define violence differently. That means that if we ask them something like, was she violent towards you? They might say no, even if it's something that would be characterized as domestic violence, domestic abuse. One reason for that is stereotypically, not all the time, of course, um, men are larger physically than their partners, especially in heterosexual relationships. And of course, that's not always true, but generally. So if there is some physical um, altercation, it might not be a fun time, but many of the men that were surveyed and with the research that were done didn't feel that it was really violent. It was just, oh, she was just upset because there isn't an innate fear that they're going to be harmed. They have the confidence that they can defend themselves if something were to become um, super, physically involved, that they could defend themselves. Also, a lot of things that are considered violence on this wheel, like economic abuse, that is, of course, intimate partner violence, is not considered violence. They just consider that part of a relationship that isn't very healthy. Men often take responsibility for their partner's abusive acts. Um, so let's say the female in a heterosexual relationship is becoming violent, physically violent. The male in the relationship may not react, might not fight back or run away. They may just stand and take it, thinking that they're being a good partner and that they're keeping the peace and they're upholding what it means to be a man. I can't speak for everyone else's culture, but ever since I was big enough to know any better, I've always been told men should never hit women. And that's a pretty pervasive thought throughout the United States. So if they fight back, they're not a man. And that's a big pervasive thought that that continues throughout male survivors. They may not understand or identify with the victim label. Most of the time, when we're doing assessments in this field, we're looking at people as, is this a victim? Is this someone that has been victimized by another person? Male survivors may not feel like they are a victim. And although this might have some implications for access to support, of course, if you're not a victim of domestic violence, you don't qualify for domestic violence support services. But there are times where males are being turned away for services when they are indeed being victimized because they don't identify with that victim label. They may not tell you that they feel unsafe because they might not feel unsafe. It's a situation that, me personally, when I'm doing these kinds of assessments, I'm thinking, are you not terrified to go home? But not everyone, of course, is the same as me. I have tons of anxiety about everything all the time. So I'm afraid of most things. But male survivors may not feel unsafe. It might not be a place they want to go. It might not be a place where they feel like they can let go and be themselves and be free, but that doesn't translate into this word unsafe. Because to feel unsafe as a man would mean that you are weak, that you're too passive, you're trapped in your own home because you can't stand up for yourself. And that's not what um, male survivors have identified that they want to feel. They don't want to feel weak. And again, they may not feel physically unsafe. Um, Something that's really important to know, and this is something that we're talking about within our organization here at DVAC, is that male victims do not seek help in the same ways that other victims may. 78% of male victims prefer to get help from an informal source, meaning somebody in their family, their good buddy that they know, somebody that they work with, not a formal service like DVAC or like the Hawaii State Coalition. But when we look at how they access those formal sources, the vast majority of them accessed resources that were web-based, meaning they filled out the referral forms online. That was totally fine. They chatted with with people online. They did text lines. They're much less likely to come forward, call a number or do an interview in person to ask for help. So that's something that maybe we could look at, and maybe is something to think about in your own organization. Are there multiple ways for the people who are trying to help to get in touch? And one big barrier, which we'll talk about, is that there's no real sense of knowing that they can get help. They are afraid that they're going to be labeled as the offender, or they're afraid that they'll be turned away because there is no resources for men. I can say I am a survivor, and many years ago when I was here in Honolulu, and I was trying to find safe shelter, there was nowhere at that time for DV survivors for a man to go. They were all either just the standard shelter for someone who's unhoused, which of course is not super confidential, or I wasn't allowed in because they only took women. So they're really less likely to seek help if they don't know that there's somewhere for them to go. And I want to read you some quotes from a study. There is a professor at, I can't think of the name of the university. It's in Georgia. Her name's Denise Hines. She has pretty much dedicated her life's work to learning more about male survivors. And she did a big study. And these are some of the comments that she got from male survivors. It is very difficult to show others my failure as a male. We must man up and take all the punishment. I find it hard to admit that this happens to me. We see this kind of stigma with all of our survivors, that they find it hard to admit, but we're adding another barrier of stigma here. So with physical violence, like I said earlier, men may not feel threatened, or that it's a genuine threat if a female partner is physically abusing them. Even though it does happen, there is physical violence that women perpetrate against men. It is very rarely perceived by the male victim as a tactic that is effective in controlling them. However, when we look at our intersection with other populations, gay men are more likely to experience similar rates of physical violence and higher rates of physical violence. It's pretty much on par with what female victims of male perpetrators will experience. And there is a lot of misunderstanding around this kind of violence when it's male on male in an intimate situation. I can say from experience, I went to file a police report for my own situation, and the police officer said, "Well, why didn't you fight back?" And I'm standing there like bloodied and bruised, and I'm like, "Did you think I didn't?" Which of course, then they're like, "Oh, well, that's not domestic violence then, because if you fight back, you can't be a victim at all," which of course we know is untrue. There's not a lot of training or research, especially when we get out into the more rural parts of the islands. With this psychological violence, I think this is you, Dominic.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn it over to you. Okay, give my voice a break here.
So psychological violence is the most common type of violence that male survivors face. When we use terms like psychological, mental, and emotional violence, these terms are often used interchangeably to mean acts, threats, or coercive tactics intended to humiliate, degrade, or undermine a person's self-worth or self-esteem, to really control them and isolate them from everyone else. So what this ends up looking like is, yelling, insulting them or belittling them, making them feel like, that their skills as like their intelligence or their skills as a worker, or making them feel like what they bring to the table is not really anything worth the time or value. They're constantly being controlled or monitored. So I'm a survivor of as well, but I also saw I also saw someone else being the victim of like monitoring and isolation. Um, she controlled all their finances. She did not tell him how much money that they had. She was constantly lying about um, uh, that they were well off, and that they were, and she was giving him an allowance, even though he was the one making all the money in the relationship. And when it came time for him, that he was like, I'm ready to leave this relationship, and he said, I want the money that I made. She showed him an empty bank account saying, and he found out that all the money that he supposedly had, um, you know, it was actually she was actually using on the side for her own uh, personal enjoyment while he was under the impression that they had savings. Competency as a father being questioned. Are you even a good dad? How can you be a good dad if you do this all the time? Or a real dad would be able to provide for his family. False allegations of child abuse or rape or sexual assault can be used against men. Just knowing the statistic that most victims are women, it can be used to threaten or control the situation that the man is that the man is in, making them, you know, keeping them in the place of fear of in fear of that potential court case. Uh, Degradation, humiliation, making fun of them, finding ways to make them feel less than human, um, kind of putting their business out in public and to make them feel like everyone knows their business. Questioning sexuality. Uh, Sometimes there's situations where someone might say something like, are you even straight? Or, like if they don't act like that stereotype man that we made that list of earlier, then it's like, oh, are you even a straight? Are you even a guy if you're not acting like this? If you're not a macho man, if you're not, if you're not a womanizer, if you're not handsome, are you even a guy? Are you gay? Are you, um, they use a lot of these very backward train of thoughts to make them question their own sense of identity, even though that's not the case. Masculinity and sexuality, it's a spectrum, and there's no one defined way to really what I lost my train of thought to really present oneself. Next slide. And then we get into the barriers to disclosing. So, what's preventing someone from stepping forward and talking about their abuse? So, again, it could be that their masculinity is under threat. They might be afraid that if they come forward, someone might say, "Are you really a guy if you can't handle the situation? You're not." You're a man. Handle this. Handle your woman, rather than offering support and just listening to them. It could be delegitimizing the abuse, saying like, "Oh, that didn't really happen," or I was actually reading a story where this man was trying to come forward and talk about the sexual abuse that his partner was conducting on him, and when he was talking to these two female officers, they were joking about how the sexual abuse must have felt good for him because he was a guy and someone was touching him that way. And then there's, again, in a more societal way, we kind of um, encourage or kind of we see people encouraging like these sexual acts happening to men, like, oh, I'm so, he's so lucky that that beautiful woman did that to him, despite, it was not a choice and it was taking someone's power away from them. There's concerns of unpredictable responses. People might be afraid of what's going to happen when they come forward. They don't know if their abuser is going to find out. They don't know if they're going to be believed. When I started coming forward, so just a little backstory about myself. My abuser was in the military. And when I was thinking about coming forward, I was told that, you might not want to do that because he's in the military. You're going to have you're going to be up against the military. And that is just one big industrial complex that you don't want to get into. And that really, made me step back and be like, oh, is this something that I really uh, want to deal with? And then when I try to tell some other people, um, I actually told my mom, and her immediate response was that she didn't believe me, and that made me start to second guess, like, if I come forward, is anyone else going to believe me? Then there's the self-perception. Some men might be afraid that they are weak or that they are worthless or that they, everything that they try to do, or if they want to come and disclose it, it's not going to be a good self-image for them. Again, they might be afraid of what others are thinking of them. Uh, they don't want people to, again, they don't want people to think that they're weak or uh, that they're less of a man or that they can't handle these situations. When we talk about heroic fatherhood, we're saying that, men just want the family to stay together. They don't want things to change. They would rather, um, you know, they don't want their kid to grow up without a dad, even though that the abuse may be, kids are aware of the abuse that is going on, and they don't. Um, I've lost my train of thought again. Sorry. The kids are aware of that the abuse is going on, so it may not be, the best thing for them. Um, and then there's always the fear of credibility as well. They're afraid of, coming forward and talking about their abuse, but then someone saying like, oh, you know, this is not actually happening to you. It sounds actually like you're the one being the abuser. Um, and there are some people who say that, people say that men refuse to ask for help, but there's been experiences where men do ask for help and they're told to, be quiet or that no one will believe them. Next slide.
So some tools that you can think about, try to put um, into practice is, for one, consider cultural differences. If it's not someone that how men are viewed in their culture, how relationships are viewed in their culture, that's something you want to try to learn more about, or refer them to a program that is culturally relevant to them. The way that men are viewed in the culture that I come from, if we can say white people have a culture, um, is very different than how men are viewed in Samoan families or in Korean families. Um, my husband is Japanese Hawaiian. How men are viewed in his family is very different than mine. Even within those particular cultural groups, it might be different from family to family. Religion might have a role to play, so you want to try to be aware of those. Compounding isolation is something that we see happen because of some of those barriers that Dominic just talked about. So compounding isolation happens when, because of something that the abuser has said or done or alleged, the people that our victim might rely on for support then flip over and they're on the side of the abuser. So how this usually happens in heterosexual relationships with a male victim survivor and a female perpetrator is perhaps the female perpetrator will make up a false allegation about sexual assault or abuse or neglect of the children. And if this person's family and support system believe that, they're now going to be siding with this abuser. So not only is this victim feeling isolated from their abuser, now all the people that they would go to for support are all turning away. That's pretty common to happen to male survivors. You want to validate and you want to explain. And of course, that's something that we're always going to do with anybody that we're talking to in our line of work. But explaining things like this doesn't make you less of a man. Being abused by somebody is never your fault. We just want to try to put it into the perspective of being male. Just because you decided to stay in this relationship that is very harmful to you for your kid doesn't mean that you're weak. It doesn't mean you're less of a man. It doesn't mean you're a bad father. It just means you were trying to protect your child. Something that comes up a lot is male survivors kind of internalize that weakness and think I'm not a man. And we see the perpetrators all the time attacking their identity or their sexual orientation. Being abused doesn't affect that. It doesn't affect your gender. It doesn't affect your sexual orientation. That's not something that that happens as much as abusers like to gaslight people into thinking that. And physiological responses of the body are not consciously controlled. Some people can kind of stop themselves from crying. I'm not one of those people. If I'm about to cry, look away, it's coming. There's no way to stop it. Some people are just like that. If you have to cry, you're going to cry. I wish I could be one of those people that when I get really angry, I could look really stern and tell people up, no, I'm gonna cry. Even though I'm mad, I'm just gonna cry. I have no idea. It just happens. That's not something we can consciously control. So just educating and validating that those responses of you maybe crying or shutting down, withdrawing into yourself in these moments of abuse, that's not you consciously making a decision to be less of a man. That is just something that happens to your body. The other thing that comes with this is just letting men who may be the victim of some kind of sexual assault. Our body does things we can't consciously control. If you are becoming aroused, that is not something you can just be like, no, don't do that, please. Especially if the younger you are. It's hormonally controlled. It's controlled by touch. We have a bajillion nerves in our bodies. That doesn't mean that someone consents to something just because they may, trying to say that I don't know where everybody is eating their lunch right now, so I'm not going to say this. I'm going to find a PG way to say it. If I don't know how to say it, if someone becomes aroused when something's being done to them without their consent, that does not mean they are enjoying it. It does not mean that they're consenting. It just means the body is reacting to it. It's like if you have ever tried to hold your breath and have a breath holding contest at the beach, there comes a point where you're going to take a breath even though you're still underwater. You can't stop it. Your body needs air. We can't control those things. And just educating male survivors that it's okay that those things happen. It's outside of your control. What we can control now is the decisions that we make moving forward so that they can get to that point of having support and trying to heal from this trauma.
So kind of going off of that and how we can't really control how, the physiological, psychological feelings that we have to this, we wanted to just kind of briefly talk about post-traumatic anger. It's that intense feeling of anger or irritability that may arise as a response to traumatic events or experiences. So, this anger is often rooted in unresolved trauma and can manifest in so many ways, such as irritability, men who've had traumatic experiences may be more easily frustrated or irritable in situations that you might not expect. Um, and that typically wouldn't provoke, such a response. They might have more emotional outbursts. They might express their anger out more outwardly in either, a verbal or physical aggression. They might be yelling more, cursing more. And, it could get to the point that they, throw or hit things. They have a hard time regulating their emotions. They may have sudden and very intense mood swings where they can go from very calm or very angry within mere moments. And sometimes they may have a hard time handling things such as stress, and they might get more overwhelmed easily. Something else is that, many survivors develop vigilance, where they may feel more on edge, and they're always constantly aware of their surroundings, making sure that they know where the exit is. They know where any safe areas are. They know where any potential weapons are. They're more aware of their surroundings, and they may um, be more alert than someone may be as uh, uh they may be more alert than someone may normally be. And then they also suppress their anger, rather than outwardly discussing or talking about what they're feeling or uh, what they are going through. Their anger becomes more inward and may manifest in more self-destructive ways. Some people may engage in substance use to help cope with the trauma that they experienced, or they may do things such as reckless driving or self-harm as a way to cope with the situation, and that they're taking the anger out on themselves rather than um, anyone else. Um, sorry. Um, men like due to societal norms, men may have learned to suppress their emotions like sadness, fear, or hurt, and as a result, those emotions often get channeled into anger, which may not seem directly linked to the trauma, uh, but it can lead to all these things that I just talked about. And then next slide. Yeah. And then when we're talking with people that we suspect was survivors, we want to always be aware of the words that we use and understand that the language that we use can influence their ability to understand their situation and the services that you may provide. We want to be able to normalize talking about violence. There's been repeated messages in our society where men can't be victims, that they don't understand what it's like. And it's important that we create a safe space for male survivors, because we want to be able to by empathizing with them, saying, hey, we understand that it's a tough situation, um, that you didn't do this, or that it's hard to be believed as a male that you're experiencing these type of things. We want to let them know that it's okay to talk about these things with you. We want to mix in gender specific language. There's been studies that show that some men are not aware that there are services available to them. Oh, I forgot to turn back on my camera. That there are services available to them. While we often use gender neutral terms to let people know that our services are available to everyone, we also may want to consider using gender specific terms, letting male survivors know that specifically that these services are available to them. Uh, that could allow them to feel more comfortable in disclosing and talking to you about their experiences with you, which kind of leads into the last part where we want to include men in our marketing, uh, just so that sometimes we get into these situations where even before that they meet with you, that what they see around them is telling them that they cannot be a survivor. I found this image, I found this picture online talking about a sexual assault intervention program. And unfortunately, I couldn't zoom this in enough, but the at the very bottom where that circle says, it says services for women, children, and families. So if a male survivor is just kind of waiting in the lobby or waiting somewhere and they see a pamphlet for the service that you see that you're offering, and they don't see that, oh, you know, there's no indication that men are welcomed here, they may feel like, oh, then I'm not actually a victim, um, that I don't, that this isn't the place for me. So maybe I should find somewhere else to go. And that's where we kind of talk about going back up one, positive male phrasing. We want to make sure that our reactions to abuse does let them know that, your reactions to the abuse that their reactions to the abuse that they're experiencing doesn't make them any less of a man, that they are, that they're safe, that, you know, that, uh, that they're safe and I keep losing my train of thought. Sorry. um, yeah, we want to make sure that we keep positive words going. A study that we found indicated that the average age for disclosure for abuse in men is 52 because there's been stereotypes and generalizations and stigma that make people feel afraid about coming forward. And while we have so many services and programs who are ready to make that are readily available to them, they just don't understand. They just don't know that it's there for them, and they spend all these years thinking that there's no one there for them and developing these long-term traumas and problems associated with that. Next slide. Oh, and I saw a comment. Let me read that real fast. Oh, yes, marketing. So we always say disclosing is a process, and we may never get an answer the first time that we talk to a male survivor. And, as we've already discussed, there are so many reasons why someone may not disclose. It always begins with recognition that there is a problem. Some men may not realize that they are the victim of violence, or they may not think that um, it's a problem that they need to disclose to you specifically. So we want to make sure that, maybe mention that, violence can happen to everybody, or it's not just a it's not just a healthcare issue. It's not just a substance issue. It's not just a relationship. It's a problem that anyone can help with. There may be readiness issues. Some people may be afraid to speak out. Some people may be ready to immediately talk about their experiences, while others may take years to come forward to talk about it. There's the fear of repercussions again. They may be afraid of the responses that disclosing gets to them, or that gets them. And then always, no matter what's it, no matter where we're at with the disclosing process, we always want to make sure that we listen and we don't judge. What's more, that's the most important thing, that we listen to them, understand what they're asking, understand what their priorities are, and we provide the appropriate services to them at that time. Next slide. Thank you. And sometimes if we want to get into it, we could always just ask direct questions. As we said, with male survivors, they may not identify with being called a victim. So if you're asking them, are you a victim of domestic abuse? Some men might say no. So it may be better to ask more direct questions. So we could say, are you getting hit, slapped, or punched by your partner? Can you tell me about the last time something violent or frightening happened in your relationship? What do you think about your current situation? Do you think that it's normal? Do you think that, that you wish that your partner would stop hitting you, or that they would stop belittling you in front of your friends and family? And then, have you ever been injured by your partner during an incident? You might not say, they might not say it right away, but they could say, "Oh yeah, there was this one time, I was, I was making her angry, and she punched me in the face, and I got a black eye, or she made me tripped after an argument," and they might, say something that indicates violence. And then next slide, thank you. So, and we found some resources that are available to everyone. Of course, there's us. DVAC, our services are available regardless of gender, uh, religion, sexuality. We're going to be there regardless. We offer advocacy services, long-term and short-term. So if someone needed help at, filing a temporary restraining order at court, we have that available. And then if they need long-term support where they need help finding resources, counseling, or just help navigating, we also offer long-term services. Legal services, and we now offer our lawyers now taking divorce and paternity cases. Support groups, anyone is available if they qualify for long-term services. We do have support groups available for them. We provide education. We let to the public, such as what we're doing today. And the easiest one, we have safety planning. If someone were to call our helpline, which I put the number on screen as well, we would be able to help them safety plan, making sure that they have um, a go-to plan if they're ever in a violent situation. And then we have Makana Oke Okua or Mocha. It's a men's clean and sober house. Substance use coercion does happen. It is a tactic of IPV. This place offers a structured, clean, and sober living environment. It's faith-based, um, and their mission and their vision is to connect men back to the communities and families and get them back into the workforce. They're located in Eva Beach, and I put their phone number here as well. So the Mayo Clinic offers a very good comprehensive safety planning guide. It's a very quick read. So if somebody was, do they have an age range for the men's clean and sober home? Let me double check. That's what I forgot to check. Um, let's see. I am pulling up my notes. Sorry. While I pull that out, I'll quickly talk about the Mayo Clinic. Sorry. So the Mayo Clinic does have a very good comprehensive guide. Uh, Again, it's quick read, so if somebody was not able to really sit down with you and um, talk about domestic violence or talk about safety planning, they may be able to look at this on their phone. They could access it more privately because they're using their phone. And it just gives general helpful tips like who to call, signs of abuse, stuff like that. And let me share this link real fast. And then we have Male Survivor. This is a nationwide nonprofit that's centered on providing support for every man at any point in their healing process. Um, it's more website based. They offer online support forums, and they offer assistance in finding support groups, therapists. However, they unfortunately don't have a list of people in Hawaii, but if you know somebody who's like on the mainland, they have a good amount of people there. And they also just provide more information on male survivors. They kind of go more in depth about like signs and possible abuse tactics.
That's it for us. We brought you in 4 minutes under 1 o'clock.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Mm. Yeah, sorry, I was just asking about the age range for the men's sober home because sometimes they don't let like youth or they want them to be like 25 and older or something. So I just was curious. I'm assuming they probably take 18 and up, but
I am trying to pull up it real fast. Sorry.
no, no worries. Thank you.
Of course. There's no indication on their website as of right as a quick um just as a quick little look. Jordan, do you possibly know?
I don't know offhand, but I haven't heard anything to indicate there is an age range other than just over 18.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, there was like when I was working direct services, there was some clean and sober homes that if they were under 25, they would call like youth providers to come and pick them up because they're like, oh, it's not the appropriate fit for someone so young. But I was just curious, but that's wonderful. I didn't even know about that one in Nova Beach, so that's great.
And
Yeah,
then
thank you.
oh sorry, I was just gonna say I
No, you go.
shared the link to the male survivor website if anyone's uh curious about that one.
Yeah, I love that there's like the safety planning and stuff. Oh, thank you guys so much. This was really good. I like
Thank you for
hearing
having
it from,
us.
yeah, you guys made a lot of great points about how a lot of men don't even realize that they're being abused, and that's something that we see a lot. So love that. I'll definitely connect with you guys more offsite about that. But yeah, thank you guys so much for taking your time on your Wednesday and doing this with us. Appreciate it.
Of course.
Thanks so
Appreciate
much.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a great rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.